397115.
We are so glad you're here to join us for this week's episode of Bigfoot for Breakfast, home of the mysterious and the macabre, where we sit in the studio every week challenging conventional thought. We are your hosts, Samantha Carter
and Sarah Jones.
Before we jump into the subject of the week, make sure that you press the subscribe button on whichever podcast platform you're listening from and leave us a rating and a review because that helps the show out a ton and we really appreciate it. If you want to contact us for any reason, if you have a show suggestion, or if you just want to say hey, you can email us at bigfootforbreakfast@outlook.com, message us on Facebook or Twitter, or you can leave us a voicemail at 641-812-2635 and we'll play it on the next episode.
Now that we've got that business out of the way, let's get on to the subject at hand. We're going to deviate a little bit from our typical subject matter, and we're going to discuss something a little bit different this week. Your childhood. More specifically, the stories and fables which your childhood dreams were built on. You lay your little head on a pillow at night, and mommy and daddy or grandma or babysitter or whoever could read you a favorite story. Or perhaps you would fire up the old picture box and watch your favorite Disney or DreamWorks movie. Now, we like to consider ourselves pretty well versed in all things Grimm, and by Grimm we mean the brothers, because where fairy tales are involved, they've got their hands in just about every single pot there is.
Now, when we, the Disney generation, thinks fairy tales, we think princes and princesses, we think defeating the evil stepmother and living happily ever after. But there is in fact a whole other world of fairy tales out there that have been watered down and adapted in order to make them more
make them more paddleable.
Yeah, paddleable.
We're gonna paddle them across the sea.
Anyway, to make them more palatable for today's culture. So, let's explore the dark nature of these tales and the more well-known men who told them.
The Grimm brothers, Jacob Ludwig Karl Grimm and Wilhelm Karl Grimm, were German siblings who are most famously known for their compilation of folk literature and music. Jacob's work in historical linguistics and Germanic philosophy were pretty renowned and were responsible for the formulation of Grimm's law. The two brothers were considered to be among the most important scholars of their time. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, they were the eldest of 5 siblings. They had 2 older brothers and 1 sister, so they were just like the cool Grimms.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if the other Grimms were jelly of the brothers.
The eldest brothers, like their father, studied law at university with the intention of going into civil service, but that dream fell as their passion for literary research grew with their work and life experiences. Not to mention their mentors.
Okay, so as we go through this episode, please forgive our pronunciation of some of these German interpretations because they are not good. So we're going to start with the Kinder- und Hausmärchen, otherwise known as Grimm's Children and Household Tales.
Märchen.
Yeah, we can't do that in America. They're collected works of 200 fantasy and fictional works. Took tales, mostly obtained through oral sources, and put them in a readable form. They maintain their folkloric character with the ultimate goal of expressing for all people the imagination and beliefs of centuries of people and cultures. The very soul of these cultures, if you will. The collection of tales was dispersed around the globe for all to enjoy and are still in circulation today. So let's talk about it.
Taco about it?
We're going to talk.
Taco Tuesday, we're going to taco about it.
It is Tuesday. Ooh, tacos.
Tacos.
Why are tacos always something that sounds good?
I don't know.
I never get sick of tacos.
What is that song, Cups? And they say, you're going to miss me by my walk, you're going to miss me by my talk. Oh, and all I can think about is, you're going to miss me by my taco.
Every time.
I love tacos.
You know, I didn't even notice it, and then my husband pointed it out, and now I can't.
Guess why he pointed it out?
I know.
I sent him a Snapchat.
Oh.
With a drawing of a taco.
Very nice. So he's unoriginal.
So let's start with the origin of one of my absolute favorite fairy tales and Disney movies, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Or, as it was originally titled, Schneewittchen. Or
what?
Sneewittchen.
Sneewittchen. We're good. We're good at it. We're going to get the hang of it by the end of this episode, and we're just going to be fluent in German.
Right. So that is Little Snow White. For those unfamiliar with the original non-Disney version of the tale, I'll give a brief synopsis. In the 1857 version, the stepmother asks the huntsman for Snow White's lungs and liver, not the heart, as in the version that we are familiar with. The hunter still fools her and instead brings the lungs and liver of a boar instead, and she boils them in salt and she eats them.
That's gross.
Which is a little different than Disney tells it, but also a little cooler. In the meantime, little Snow White runs off to the dwarves, who in this version have no names or individual personalities. Insert generic dwarf here. The queen comes to the dwarf's house not once, but 3 times. And each time she leaves with Snow White apparently dead. The 3rd time, the queen returns with what the brothers Grimm described as a poisonous apple. So this one's super duper poison.
Extra poisony.
But only on half. The other side is not poison, so she bites the good side to convince her stepdaughter to taste the apple.
I feel like I would be scared that the poison would seep into the good side.
I don't think I would take a bite out of an apple after someone else has already taken a bite out of the apple.
Right, and especially they're lucky, that queen is lucky it wasn't during the COVID season.
Right?
Snow White wouldn't have been.
Or flu season.
Mm-mm.
And then you gotta worry about getting the lip herpes.
What?
You're gonna get some cold sores. You don't eat after people. It's like using their toothbrush.
Tell that to my kids who are always stealing my food.
Tell that to your kids who every time they spend the night at my house, I have to get a new toothbrush because I don't know which one of them used it.
I don't even trust my kids being in the bathroom alone for a little while and the toothbrush being slightly moved around.
No, one time, I think it was Riley. Riley told me, "Oh, I used this toothbrush to clean the sink. You're welcome." And I'm like, "That's my toothbrush. Thanks for that."
Should have fed him an apple.
Right? So, anyway, of course she takes a bite and she falls down dead. The dwarves are unable to revive her, so they put her in a glass coffin embossed with her name, and after a few years, the prince arrives to the house, sees the dead girl, and falls in love with her, which is kind of weird. And it gets weirder.
That's one thing I never could understand about Disney movies, that it's such a superficial love, obviously. She's purty.
Right?
You got a purty mouth.
Oh, it gets worse. So, he wants to purchase said corpse from the dwarves, but they refuse. But he finally convinces them to sell by telling them that he will die if he can't see her every day for the rest of his life and do whatever with her corpse, like a weirdie. So, it goes. As his servants are carrying her home, oops, they drop her. Essentially, Heimlicking her. A chunk of poison apple comes flying out of her mouth and she returns to life. And that sounds much more like my life story. No romantic kiss. Oops, I dropped ya. But hey, you're alive now. So the prince marries her because he owns her, and then they even invite the evil stepmother to the wedding. But when she sees Snow White alive and marrying a prince, she is so petrified with fright that she could not budge. Iron slippers, which had conveniently already been heated over a fire, were brought over to her with some tongs, and she had to put on the red-hot slippers and dance until she fell down dead. Boom. Take that.
That's a hell of a deal.
That is a hell of a deal. Dance!
That's some Criminal Minds stuff.
Right?
All of it. Let me buy this dead girl.
I'll give you $2. I'll give you about $3.50.
$3.50. In an earlier 1812 version, the evil queen is her mom. No stepmother at all. How much more tragic is her jealous rage when that little girl is her own daughter? Also, rather than having her taken out and having her organs harvested, the huntsman's actually ordered to, quote, take her out to the woods to a remote spot and just stab her to death. She still eats her organs, though. Or at least she thinks she does anyway. Another small difference in this version is the ending. In the 1812 version, the prince makes the servants carry the coffin with him from room to room, so his dead love doesn't leave his sight. But one of the servants eventually gets sick of carting the enormous glass box around, so he opens it, smacks the comatose girl, and that causes the chunk of apple to dislodge from her throat, waking her up. Abuse of a corpse is also romantic, just like carrying her from room to room, staring at her.
So there's that.
Right.
But many are unaware that this fairy tale is actually based on the life of a 16th century Bavarian noblewoman named Marguerite van Waldeck.
See, almost flew in already.
She grew up in Bad Wildungen. I don't know why it was bad, but it was. And her brother used small children to work in his copper mine. And because of the physical labor mining required, the children often appeared disfigured and were despairingly referred to as dwarves. The element of the poison apple is also rooted in some historical fact, as there was an old man who would offer tainted fruit to the workers. And by workers, we mean the children. And then other children that he believed stole from him. Marguerite's stepmother, who in real life did despise her beautiful stepdaughter, banished her to court in Brussels in order to get her out of her sight. It was there that Prince Philip II of Spain became entangled in a steamy love affair, which was largely opposed by his father, the King of Spain. So naturally, he sent Spanish agents to murder Marguerite. And they did, in fact, murder her. They poisoned her.
It's the only way.
It is the only way. So, no happily ever after for her. Sad deal. So, maybe refrain telling these versions to your daughter as you tuck her in bed at night.
Well, A, we don't want children to think it's fine if you choke, because years later you can be revived by a kiss. People start keeping dead people in the bed upstairs.
But there was no kiss.
Oh, there wasn't?
No.
And Prince Philip is from Sleeping Beauty. What's he doing over there with Snow White, right?
That's a good goddamn question.
Right?
Prince whore.
Cheating bastard.
Double dipping.
So let's deviate a little bit from some of the more well-known fairy tales and talk about some of the more obscure fables of history. Say, The Flayed Old Woman.
Which just sounds interesting, right?
It's already awful. This was written by Giambattista, that is a on-the-fly pronunciation, Basile, around 1634. The story goes that the king meets two hideous, deformed old hags who happen to be hidden behind a wall. He's enamored by their personalities, and he's convinced that they must be beautiful young women.
See, looks don't matter. Personalities are good.
Yeah.
Like ours.
Exactly. Awesome.
Right?
I'm nice, damn it.
God damn it. People like me.
He persuades one of the sisters to come to him in the night. This is where it gets weird, as usual, because humanity. She ties all her loose, sagging skin behind her back, and they get it on. Of course, the king finds out, and as any king would, he throws her out of a window. God.
I mean, that's what you do.
I guess. But her skin catches on some of the branches. And there she is. Sorry. Dangling in the trees when some passing fairies see her. Good thing passing fairies came by. They are so amused by the situation that they turn her into a beautiful young maiden that she pretended to be. The king marries her, and they live happily ever after. So the king that threw her out the window?
Yes.
Same king. And he just marries her then?
Well, yeah, because now she's really pretty.
No. What happened to the sister, you ask? Well, now the beautiful sister tells her that to achieve the same look, she must skin herself alive. So she goes ahead and does that, and she bleeds to death. But hey, at least one of them gets to live happily ever after, right? That's totally fairy tale criteria. Someone lives happily ever after, all good.
Oh. Anyway, another super well-known and popular Disney tale with dark origin is Sleeping Beauty. Originally appearing in Basile's Pentamerone in 1634, titled Sun, Moon, Talia, the sweet story that we know and love is pretty dark and tragic. So Talia, aka Sleeping Beauty, gets a splinter of flax stuck under her fingernail and falls into a death-like sleep. Like in the more popular version, her father is crippled by grief and orders everyone to abandon the palace and surrounding land so that he can move on. But another king, not a handsome prince, finds Talia asleep in her castle and is overcome with lust. So he rapes her while she sleeps. As a result, she falls pregnant, and while in a coma, she carries and gives birth to a set of twins. One of the babies sucks the splinter of flax from her finger, lifting the curse. She wakes, finding that she had been raped and is now the mother of twin babies named Sun and Moon. The king returns. I wonder what he wants. But this time, finds her awake, and they fall in love. The king's wife finds out.
Oh, there's a wife.
There's a wife, and she decides that she wants to kill and eat the children. But the cook saves them and exposes the evil queen's plan, so they burnt her alive. How quaint.
Very sweet.
For the life of me, I cannot figure out why they would change these stories. It has it all. Forbidden love, deception, a murder plot, and a happy ending. I don't get it.
It's like either like an episode of Jerry Springer or Dateline or both things.
It definitely has all the makings of a fantastic feature film.
Like a Lifetime movie.
Right? Alas, Charles Perrault introduced fairies to the Sleeping Beauty, or Little Briar Rose, and replaced the married king with a dashing bachelor prince. The prince's mother then assumed the role of the evil queen and threatened to eat the babies and attempted to throw their mother into a pit of vipers. Now we've got snakes! In a dramatic turn of events, the prince saves his wife and his mother falls to her death like an evil, villainous queen should.
Mm-hmm.
Preach!
Somehow, that tale developed into a much happier tale without rape or illegitimate babies or cannibalism, I assume no vipers, and lots of singing and animal friends. So much less intriguing. There are theories out there that indicate that the story of Sleeping Beauty may have been loosely based on Brunilda, who was Queen Regent of Austrasia during the end of the 6th century. This association is based on the similarities between the Grimm version of the tale with the Volsunga saga, which is the 13th century Icelandic saga about a girl who is raised as a shield maiden, a warrior. But at the ripe old age of 12 years old, she is forced to swear an oath of loyalty to King Agnar. She's punished for this by Odin, who stabs her with a thorn. So the details of this particular tale were a little difficult for me to follow. However, to summarize, a young warrior named Sigurd found a person lying asleep but fully armed. He removed the helmet from their head, discovering that she was a woman. Observing that her corselet, which is the armor equivalent of a corset, was tight as if it had grown into her skin, like she'd been there for a long time. So he cut it from the neck down and along both sleeves with his sword and took it off of her. And woot woot, she woke up. Woot woot, problem solved. But why was she laying there? Oh yeah, the thorn.
The thorn. Another fairy tale favorite, which is rooted in a certain amount of historical fact, is that of Beauty and the Beast. In the modern and most recognizable version of this story, the gorgeous outcast Belle rejects the advances of the brutish Gaston and finds and rescues her father from the castle of a cursed prince, whose cruel treatment of an enchantress in disguise earned him a curse, which transformed him into a beast and created a dark atmosphere of his once gorgeous palace. Also, it turned all of those who worked for him into furniture or household appliances of some sort. She exchanges herself as a prisoner for her father's release, and in so doing is imprisoned in said castle with said beast. In her time in captivity, she and the beast develop a certain level of respect and admiration for each other, which later develops into love. In the end, her love breaks the curse and they all live happily ever after, except for Gaston, who plummets to his death after trying to kill the beast during a good old-fashioned lynch mob. The ultimate moral of this tale, it seems, is to be kind to others no matter who they are and don't judge a book by its cover, so to speak.
I always find it funny that in these types of movies, they'll put somebody who's very unattractive out there and reward the people who are nice to them because they end up being somebody famous or rich. Like that's what we valued in society even back then. It wasn't just being kind to others. It's be kind to others because they might be rich people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Now the rumor is that this particular tale is based on the life story of a man born in 1537 named Pedro Gonzalez. This man was born with an affliction known as hypertrichosis, which is an excessive hair growth over and above the normal for the age, sex, and race of an individual. According to Healthline.com, this is a result of an abnormal 8th chromosome and has been aptly named werewolf syndrome. And well, as we all know, people are dicks, so as a child he was captured and treated like an animal. He was kept in an iron cage and provided a delicious diet of raw meat and animal feed. Amazing. Humans are shit. They are. A statement I will justify by informing you that he was given as a gift to King Henry II of France at the young age of 10. Keep in mind that he was pretty much a feral child. Having been abandoned due to his condition, the gracious king had him taken to the dungeons so that the court physicians could study him. He was barely capable of speaking. However, he did know his name, whispering Pedro Gonzalez. King Henry II was known for his love of collectible oddities, which would include human freaks. Quote, freaks. We did not. It was considered a symbol of wealth and status for royals to own dwarves as court jesters. Now, let's go ahead and clarify that under no circumstances is it okay to cage and treat people as property, which includes the giving of one human to another as a gift. Anyway, Henry was kind enough to provide him with a fine education, befitting of a nobleman, and dubbed him Petrus Gonzalez, which is the Latin version of his given Spanish name. He was raised in French court, which, under the rule of Henry and Catherine de' Medici, could probably be a terrifying place. But that's neither here nor there.
I always seem to stumble upon like all the stories around Catherine de' Medici because she was also a big part of our...
Oh, the plague.
Was it the plague or was it the deja vu?
I don't know.
Because we talked about Nostradamus,
Oh, yeah.
who was also one of her court pets. Catherine de' Medici was well known for her love of playing matchmaker. So, after King Henry's untimely death, seeing the man as more of an experiment than anything else, she matched young Petrus in marriage to the daughter of a court servant whose name was also Catherine. She did go through nearly a dozen girls before finding the one that she deemed most suitable, and despite his education and status as a nobleman, he was seen as a beast and therefore could not be paired with the daughter of a noble. During their 40 years of marriage, they conceived and birthed 7 children. Boom! Fairy tale.
So wait, if he couldn't be paired with the daughter...
He couldn't be paired with a noble daughter. He was paired with a servant daughter.
Okay, well, you didn't say that.
Yes, I did. The daughter of a court servant, whose name was also Catherine.
Okay, fine. You said it.
You don't even listen when I talk, do you?
I do.
Except for those times when you don't. Anyway.
I've got no retort.
The first 2 children were normal, healthy baby boys. 4 of their later children did have hypertrichosis, and were also used for the entertainment of the nobles of French court, having family portraits commissioned and gifted to the nobles to be kept as curiosities. Of course, the children who did not have the abnormality were ordered to be kept out of the portraits in order to maintain the appearance that Catherine had been successful in her experiment in taming the quote-unquote wild man and developing quote-unquote hybrid children. Catherine de' Medici, ladies and gentlemen, wow. Just wow.
Because their parents were seen as the property of the queen, the children were sold to other families of nobility. Sadly, it seemed that Petrus and his lovely wife, Catherine, were pretty much seen and used as breeders for making the novelty babies. As luck would have it, the children were actually treated pretty well in their homes that they were sold to, so it would seem. They too were given high-quality educations and provided with adequate and healthy diets, the best of clothes, lovely, comfortable homes to live in, as well as access to the best doctors. So while they were wrongfully seen as property, like owning a novelty item, given the status of their birth and that their parents had no social standing to speak of, their lives were pretty luxurious compared to what might have been if their parents had been free. Of course, had their father not been claimed by Henry, he probably would have died young in a cage, being treated like an animal, never been married to their mother, and the children would never have existed at all. So there's that. There are some stunning portraits of some of the daughters in their fancy dresses and flowers in their hair on top of their heads for your viewing pleasure on the internet. Most notably, Antoinetta, who was given a noble family in Bologna. Is it Bologna? Bologna.
It's Bologna, Italy. It's Bologna, Italy.
They're going to Bologna.
Not arguing. It's Bologna. Bologna.
How do you say it?
My Bologna has a first name.
Yeah.
It's I-T-A-L-Y.
O-S-C-A-R.
Just say Italy.
I think that's best.
Bologna. Bologna. A load of malarkey.
It is malarkey. She was given to a noble family in Italy. There are journals from a doctor who saw her, and I think that it's important to note that those journals do refer to her as a she and not as an it or an animal, which is pretty good for the time, I suppose. The other afflicted siblings, sisters Francesca and Madalena, as well as brother Enrico, were likewise sold to noble families, but there was much less information available regarding what happened to them or where they ended up. Eventually, their parents were allowed to retire from their baby-making factory positions, and there was some speculation based on the portrait of the family, in which Catherine's hand was placed upon Petrus's shoulder, which was apparently not a common element in those types of family portraits, which indicate that there may have been a developed love or regard for one another, even after having been forced to marry. So maybe we can call that somewhat of a happy ending for them. You know, aside from their children being taken away from them and sold. I mean, I could see that. It'd be a huge common grief for the two of them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We found love in a hopeless place. You don't know that song?
I don't. Is it pop music?
Yes.
Oh, that's why. Got to get that Johnny Lee on. Looking for love in all the wrong places.
No.
Put that old barroom music.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.
I am going to introduce the story of a historical figure, a Christian Greek saint and martyr from around the 3rd century named Saint Barbara. So, the story goes that Barbara had been locked up in a tower by her pagan father to keep her isolated from the outside world. However, she had not been as isolated as he had hoped and had in fact converted to Christianity in her captivity, thus rejecting the pagan-based arranged marriages that he pushed on her. Eventually, he found out that she was a Christian and tried to kill her, but the lore alleges that her prayers opened up a wall and she managed to escape. Eventually, though, she was found, tortured, and killed, and through it all, she willfully maintained her faith, thus earning the title of Saint Barbara. Now, I share with you this particular historical figure due to its perceived link to another tale, one which finds a damsel locked in a tower. That's right, you guessed it, Shrek. No, I'm kidding. It's Rapunzel.
Shrek. Lord Farquaad came to pick her up.
Do you think he's compensating for something? Oh, do you know the Muffin Man?
We're so funny. God, we're funny. I want to start with the earliest version of the story, which from what I could find is titled Petronella, which was written by Basile in 1335. So in this version, there's a pregnant woman. No father or man was mentioned. So the strong, independent single mother that she is,
Yes, she is.
she climbs into a forbidden garden, which belongs to an ogre. Damn it. Not a witch as in other versions, which kind of does link to Shrek a little, right? Ogres are like onions?
You leave them out in the sun, they start sprouting little white heads?
No. Ogres are not like cake. Also in this version, it is parsley that she is carving, not in fact the type of lettuce.
Craving.
Craving.
Not carving parsley.
I was in my head, I was like, that would be difficult. Like, that's crazy.
That's crazy.
Why are people carving up parsley? I went with it though.
I need coffee and a nap.
I tried to keep it smooth. You messed me all up. Okay. She wasn't carving the parsley. She was craving it. Because in the other versions, a type of lettuce called Rapunzel. But it was actually parsley.
So, first of all, let's discuss the various types of greens and address why parsley is not high on the list of craveable ones.
Or carvable ones.
Because, number one, it's freaking parsley.
I love parsley though.
It has no flavor.
It does too.
It does
You put some
not.
parsley in onions with potatoes. Ugh. Tell me I'm wrong.
Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
With parsley.
So anyway, back to the story. The ogre catches her and makes a deal with her, which is that she can have the greens if she gives the ogre her child. Then, for some outrageous reason, the woman agrees to surrender her child for parsley. For freaking parsley.
I get it. I love parsley.
So I'm sure you picked up on it at this point. Petronella, which is a play on the word for parsley in the Neapolitan dialect.
The ogre doesn't claim the baby girl right away. In fact, it wasn't until she was 7 years old that she was walking past the ogre's house and the ogre tells her to remind her mother of the promise. So she does. Terrified, the woman tells her daughter that her response is, quote, take her. And she did. I made the assumption that the ogre was a male. The ogre collected Petronella and hid her in a tower in the woods that had only one window for her to see the world, no door. So the more commonly known version by the Brothers Grimm, which was published in their Children's and Household Tales collection from 1812, has many similarities to the older Basile version. The major differences are that it is the woman's husband who sneaks into the garden and the garden belongs to a witch and not an ogre. And of course there is a little matter of the Rapunzel lettuce versus the parsley, which also goes by the name corn salad, apparently, and is a leafy vegetable with a nutty flavor. Rapunzel lettuce?
Yeah, I'd never heard of Rapunzel lettuce.
I don't know. Which to me sounds much better than parsley. So let's get back to business here. In the Basile version, the prince finds her, he climbs up her hair, and they do the horizontal tango.
So that's what it is.
Petronella tells the prince to bring a rope with him when he comes back. Then she drugs the ogre, steals 3 magic acorns from her, and makes a break for it with the prince. When the ogre wakes up and chases them, she throws the acorns one by one. The first one turns into a fierce dog. The ogre stops it by throwing it a crust of bread. The next one turns into a lion, dressed as a donkey. I see. Ogres and donkeys. The ogre just charges it down. And finally, the last one turns into a wolf, which eats the ogre. The star-crossed lovers make a clean break and they get married, living happily ever after.
As Wilhelm and Jacob tell it, the prince does find her and sees how the witch gets into the tower by climbing her hair. So he ascends the tower, professing his love for her and asking her to marry him, and she gets knocked up. Eventually, the witch finds out about her little romance, and in her anger, she snatches Rapunzel's hair up, wrapping the braids twice around her left hand, and snip-snap, she crops the locks off with a pair of scissors. Then she sent poor Rapunzel into a desert to suffer alone for what she had done. She hangs the braids from the window for the prince to climb, and surprise, he found the witch, who told him he would never see Rapunzel again. She didn't kill him, but it sounds like her taunting was enough to prompt an attempt at suicide by leaping from the tower, to no avail. He did live, but in his escape, he fell into a bush of thorns which poked his eyes out. So he's left to wander blind, alone through the woods, foraging for berries and lamenting the loss of his great love, who he met for 5 seconds. Or hopefully a little longer since, she got knocked up. Years later, he does find her and their twin babies. They shared a loving embrace, and as she cried, her tears restored his sight. He took her and the babies to his castle, and they lived happily ever after. The end.
Oh, that's okay. That's not that bad, right?
I do feel like we should point out that it is somewhat problematic that the witch thought that having babies out of wedlock from premarital sex was far worse a crime than stealing someone's child for the price of some lettuce and then hiding her in the tower for her whole life.
Yeah.
I've done exactly one of those things, and I find the other to be off limits, especially if it were trading for parsley.
Mm-hmm. There's always a lot of, morality issues from back then that I don't understand.
I got questions.
But, different times.
Right?
Different times we can't judge.
No, we can.
The next story doesn't really have much in the way of historical roots, but it can take you to some dark, speculative places. So we're going to go ahead and discuss it. J.M. Barrie published a novel for adults in 1902 called The Little White Bird. It was in this book that he debuted the then infant Peter Pan. The Little White Bird is, as it turns out, a semi-autobiographical story in which a man becomes somewhat enamored with a little boy who he wants to steal away from his mother. In his quest to get close to this child, he creates the story of Peter Pan, a week-old baby who leaves home and doesn't age any further. In this tragic tale, the baby believes confidently that the mother will always leave the window open for him, so he lives freely, flying with the birds and fairies without fear of being forgotten or losing her love. Sadly, by the time he decided to return home to his mother, he finds the windows barred and another baby cradled in her arms. He's been replaced. She's replaced him. Super sad.
Right.
Why would they make stories like this? He's a magic boy who has cool powers, and his mom will always love him, and he comes home and nope, slam. What's the point of that? There's no...
In her defense, she doesn't know where he went. She didn't know that he was magic.
Oh.
He just disappeared.
I misunderstood then.
I think that's from what I gather.
I assumed she knew he was flying about.
Didn't you ever see the beginning of Hook?
And then she probably barred the windows so that people couldn't steal her baby. Mm-hmm. She probably thought it was Lindbergh.
So the character, Peter Pan, was so loved that in 1904, Barrie introduced a play based on the character, which was called The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, which of course later in 1911 was adapted into a book. The real-life basis of the story begins with Barrie, at the age of 37, meeting a 5-year-old boy for whom he developed a great affection. This boy's name was George Davies. His 4 little brothers, John, Michael, Nicholas, and Peter, were later included in this questionably affectionate relationship. It had been widely speculated in the literary world whether or not Barry's affection for the boys was entirely appropriate, a question to which there has never really been found a definitive answer. Regardless of having been twice married, Barry never fathered any children of his own and has been described as having been asexual. Nicholas, the youngest of the children, spoke on his perception of the situation as an adult, stating, quote, "I don't believe Uncle Jim ever experienced what one might call a stirring in the undergrowth for anyone, man, woman, adult, or child. He was an innocent," end quote.
Don't call it an undergrowth.
I'm going to start using that. I'm having a stirring.
I don't think you should.
I'm having a stirring.
You're going to avoid the word undergrowth?
I can't say it. I'm not going to give any sort of indication about that. So anyway, after the death of their mother, Barry became the guardian of the children, playing endless games around the lake, creating infinite, elaborate sagas of pirates and Indians and fairies, which may have provided a small amount of joy in their very tragic lives. George died at the age of 21 as a soldier during World War I in 1915. Michael followed, passing just before his 21st birthday in 1921, believed to have been suicide by some because he drowned. John died of lung disease in 1959 at age 65, and Peter committed suicide at the age of 63 in 1960. Nicholas died of natural causes at the ripe old age of 77 in the year 1980.
The tale picks up where the little white bird leaves off, but finding Peter Pan, a school-aged boy with all of Neverland to play with, and endless pirates to fight, and Lost Boys to play with, and of course Wendy Darling to replace his original inferior mother. That is, of course, until she inevitably grew up, no longer able to play with him, ultimately abandoning Peter, like his birth mother did. While this does create a stir of emotion in Peter, there is justifiable room to speculate as to whether a character such as him would truly be capable of emotions, as Peter kills his playmates in the Lost Boys just as easily as he slays pirates, either to thin the herd or as he promised to stop them from growing up, because it's against the rules. Another disturbing element is his tendency to alter the Lost Boys' bodies so that they can fit through the tree holes that led to their underground lair, as well as providing them with pretend meals and refusing to believe that they are still hungry, because he has no ability to differentiate between what is real and what is pretend. This paints a dark picture and can make it difficult for us to determine if Peter Pan is a lovable protagonist or a villain in disguise.
Other theories suggest that he may be an angel of death type entity, escorting children who have died to the world beyond where they play and are children forever, which is sad. But in the words of Peter Pan, to die would be an awfully big adventure.
It does put a dark spin on things, doesn't it? So if that doesn't ruin your childhood enough, let's keep moving on to dissecting fairy tales. Cinderella was alleged to be based on Rhodopis, whose master brought her to Egypt, where she ended up marrying the king of Egypt. One day she was bathing when an eagle snatched one of her sandals and flew away with it. Eventually, he dropped it in the lap of the Egyptian king. Struck by the strange occurrence and the beauty of the sandal, he sought out the owner of the beautiful sandal, and when he found her, he made her his queen. I am unsure exactly how it was that he discovered who the owner of the shoe was, or if he went around trying it on every woman in Egypt. Who knows? So that's apparently the real person who the story was based on.
This story can actually be traced back to China in 700 AD with the story of Yishen. In this version of the story, her father actually had 2 wives. Each wife delivered a baby girl, but sadly, one of the wives turned ill and died, which was Ye Shen's mother. Not long after that, her father also died, and poor Ye Shen was despised by her stepmother, as she was far more beautiful than both her stepmother and stepsister. So, you know the story, she was jealous and cruel and abusive, even starving her like in the Western version of the story. Also like the Western Cinderella, her only friend was an animal, a goldfish with big, bright eyes. The stepmother gave Ye Shen almost no food, but she still always found some to share with her fish, causing it to grow to an enormous size. When her stepmother discovered the friendship between Ye Shen and the fish, she did the unthinkable. She killed the fish, cooked it, and served it for dinner. Ye-Shen mourned the loss of her only friend and sat crying to him, when an old man appeared out of nowhere and advised her to keep the fish's bones and speak to them when she needed help, and she did. So at this point, the bones take on the role of the fairy godmother, and when the festival came along, she asked the fish to help her, and it gave her a pair of fancy shoes, and of course she lost one after meeting the prince. She was looking for the shoe because the fish bones wouldn't talk to her anymore since she lost one of them. She was found by the guards, tried on the shoe, and married the prince.
So this one isn't quite as morbid as a lot of other fairy tales, but cooking the fish was pretty harsh. The Basile version of the tale also has some morbid elements in which Disney and Mother Goose left out, like the part of the story where she snaps her stepmother's neck with the lid of a trunk, as instructed by her governess. But she was a cold-blooded killer nonetheless. Cinderella, serial killer. Of course, then, the thought of a governess...
T-H-O-T. Thought. A thought is an informal or derogatory term describing a woman who has many casual sexual relationships or encounters.
I did not know that. I'm going to use it. People will be so confused. You thought?
I thought what?
Right? That's what I would say.
I thought, putty that.
The thought of a governess marries Cinderella's dad and banishes Cinderella to the kitchen. On that note, let's hit another version, another of the lesser known Grimm Brothers tales that is definitely intended for mature audiences.
There's one story called How Some Children Play at Slaughtering. Sounds awesome, right? There's actually two versions of this, and in one version, the butcher, who's a child, slits the throat of the pig, while the other child, playing the cook, collects the blood in a bowl. A councilman walking nearby sees the incident and takes the butcher to the mayor, who immediately calls a council to deal with the boy. The council can't agree on what to do with the boy, however, because the murder was part of a child's game, they decide to test the child by offering him a gold coin or a delicious apple. If the boy picks the apple, he would go free. If he picks the gold coin, he's to be killed. The boy laughs, grabs the apple, and the council lets him go without any punishment, and that's the end.
The second version of the story is a little more gruesome. In this version, the child playing the butcher slits the throat of the pig, a role which happens to be played by his little brother. Their mom sees this go down from the upstairs bathroom where she's bathing another child, and in a moment of temporary insanity and rage, she kills her murderous son. Afterwards, she goes back up to the child she was bathing and finds that kid drowned in the tub. Overcome with grief, she hangs herself. Her husband comes home from working in the fields and discovers that his whole family is dead. He becomes depressed and dies not too long after. Happily ever after, the end. I did not manage to find that particular tale was rooted in any historical occurrence, much to my relief.
There's another tale called The Dead Mother, which, of course, is a very common element in fairy tales. This is a story of Russian origin. For a quick summary of this story, there's a couple that is the envy of all the neighbors, and they have a child, but then the mother dies. The child is inconsolable, cries all the time. The father hires an old woman to help care for the baby, but she can do nothing to soothe it. However, there is a period through the night that the baby seems to feel content and sleep. One night, the old woman caring for the baby notices that it sounds like someone opened the door to the room, but the baby was silent and sleeping. One night she heard the same thing, and upon checking on the baby, they found that the dead mother of the child was standing over him, bent down as he nursed from her dead breast. She was wearing the exact clothing that she was buried in. She noticed them watching, stood up, said nothing, and walked out. The end. Not creepy at all. Zombie milk.
Right. If you think about it, there is some seriously morbid subject matter littered throughout the stories and rhymes of our childhood that some never do think about. You sing the songs not understanding in your innocence, and then once you outgrow them, you don't think about them anymore. For example, one I'm sure most people are aware of is Ring Around the Rosie. Some interpretations of this nursery rhyme is that it's about the bubonic plague, pocket full of posies, as they were used to cover the smell of the sick and the dead. Ashes, ashes, burning the bodies, we all fall down, you're all going to die. There are those who argue with that interpretation, as there is not really any proof. There's even arguing over where the rhyme itself originated. So it's hard to say if that's true, but it does kind of fit, and it's morbid AF. So we naturally dig it.
In 1949, the newspaper The Observer ran a parody of the rhyme beginning, "Ring a geranium, a pocket full of uranium." referring to the bombing of Hiroshima. Classy.
Yeah, real classy. That's awful. Rockabye Baby is another one that always struck me as pretty dark for singing a baby to sleep. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who wondered why we do console our crying babies with a song about a baby who dies in a tragic accident. There are competing theories about the origins of this rhyme. One holds it's a sly reference to the child of King James II and his queen, who is rumored to have been born to someone else and smuggled into the birthing room to ensure a Catholic heir. The wind would be a reference to Protestantism, which eventually blew them all away. So the king went all raising Arizona and took another baby.
You go give me that baby.
Right.
Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? With silver bells and cockle shells and pretty maids all in a row. So Bloody Mary was murderous enough to have been immortalized in several nursery rhymes. One theory is that this rhyme is about Queen Mary's favorite pastime, killing Protestants. The silver bells and cockle shells refer to instruments of torture, and the pretty maids would be that efficient new instrument for cutting off heads, the guillotine.
I mean, they did say she was contrary. Georgie Porgy, pudding and pie, kissed the girls and made them cry. When the boys came out to play, Georgie Porgy ran away. However, it seems that Georgie did not only kiss the girls. The theory here is that it is a rhyme about notorious 17th century Duke of Buckingham, George Villiers, who was a bisexual pretty boy and a social climber who indiscriminately used his good looks to sleep his way to the top with both male and female courtiers, including the king.
Ladybug, ladybug, fly away home. Your house is on fire and your kids are all alone. Or your children are gone. Also, Ladybug is the American version and Ladybird is the original lyric, as Ladybird is the English term for ladybug. Farmers would apparently yell out the rhyme to the valuable pest control bug before they burnt their fields after a harvest.
Our grandpa sang that to us.
I do recall that one tragic song.
I remember even as a child being like, what?
What? That's terrible.
Right? The other theory is that a ladybird is a derivative of the Catholic term Our Lady. The tradition of calling this rhyme was believed to have been used as a seemingly innocent warning cry to Catholics who refused to attend Protestant services as required by the Act of Uniformity in 1559 and 1662. This law forbade priests to say Mass and forbade communicants to attend it. Consequently, Mass was held secretly in open fields. Many priests were executed by the terrible death of being burned alive at the stake, or even worse, being hung, drawn, and quartered.
So, there's some food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bigfoot for Breakfast. Don't forget to push the subscribe button on whichever podcast platform you're listening from. Leave us a rating and a review because we really appreciate that. If you want to contact us for any reason, if you have any show suggestions, or you just want to say hey, you can email us at bigfootforbreakfast@outlook.com, message us on Facebook or Twitter, or you can leave us a voicemail at 641-812-2635 and we'll play it on the next episode. We do hope to have you back for the next one, so stay safe out there, take care of yourselves, and show respect for others. And don't purchase corpses or fall in love with them.
Don't buy dead girls.
Very frowned upon.
For good reason.
And for God's sake, stop eating parsley.
No.
Come at me, bro.